Ecuador's president returns to Quito as protesters are heavily repressed in the historic center. A Tunisia court orders the release of presidential candidate Nabil Karoui. And police rescue 69 people kept like slaves in the biggest human trafficking ring in Trinidad and Tobago. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. We begin in Ecuador, where a huge march by indigenous and other protesters has been heavily repressed in the center of Quito. Thousands of demonstrators made their way peacefully through the historic center as Ecuador held a national strike against the government's austerity measures. This is the 7th day of protests against the measures, which are part of President Lenin Moreno's deal with the International Monetary Fund. In the last 2 days, indigenous marchers have converged on the capital from the north and the south. They've been joined by students, social movements, and ordinary citizens angry at the fuel price rises and cuts in workers' rights. As the march moved close to the presidential palace, they were met with tear gas from the police, and for the first time, water cannons were used. Some of the protesters responded with stones. On Tuesday, the government imposed an overnight curfew prohibiting people from being in the vicinity of government buildings. According to authorities, some 700 people have been detained so far, and there are reports that at least 2 people have died. Leaders of the main indigenous movement, CONAIE, have flatly rejected remarks by Ecuador's Vice President Otto Sonne-Holzner about possible negotiations. On social media, they said it was untrue that CONAIE leaders were in talks with the government at the United Nations office in Ecuador. We are with our members in the streets of the historic center, they said. One indigenous leader told the crowd. Our correspondent Estefania Bravo is in the historic center in Quito with the latest update on the situation.
Hello, we are here in the center of Quito, specifically in the Flores Avenue, and it is right in the heart of Quito. We are here in the protest. The protest continues. It is around 3 p.m. local time, and the indigenous movement students have come together to the center of Quito, where the presidential palace is, to demand the resignation of President Lenin Moreno, and also for him to raise the economic measures of Lenin Moreno. As you can see, we are seeing people we are seeing police throw gas bombs at the protesters. As you can see over there, the police barricade is very close to people, and the police is pressing very violently against the people that are here, that are protesting very peacefully, but they want to get to the special office and are being repressed by police. So we'll continue to update you as soon as we have more information. We will still be here throughout the day to continue to give you any updates. Back to you.
That was Estefania Bravo in the historic center with that report. A protest against the economic package has also taken place in Ecuador's second city of Guayaquil. The police fired tear gas at this peaceful march as well. President Lenin Moreno moved the government to Guayaquil as the indigenous marchers approached the capital. But indigenous communities from the coastal region have also arrived in Guayaquil to join protests with local social movements.
It affects my own pocket because I have to fill my tank twice a week. Each tank full costs $15 more. That's $30 extra a week. Over the whole year, that's $1,500. That means the health and education of my family, our vacations, and then the civil servants over here who are having 50 days pay taken away. That means they are eliminating the end-of-year bonus salary. People aren't stupid, President Moreno. Please change course. Stop these measures.
Now, President Moreno has returned to Quito after abandoning the capital for Guayaquil last week. Our correspondent Carla Gonzalez is in Guayaquil with the latest.
So now in the afternoon, the large march that was taking over 9 de Octubre has been cleared off by the police and the military. We are seeing behind me several people that have blocked the march, the Indigenous march. Students, campesinos, several Indigenous leaders that have joined the national strike today here in Guayaquil. But on the other side, we have a large march taking place today in the same street, in 9 de Octubre, which was called by the municipality, which is against this march, against the Indigenous march and the Indigenous arriving to the city. As we know, President Lenín Moreno has arrived to Quito. He left the city of Guayaquil, which was declared the headquarters of the government for the time of the state of exception that would last for 30 more days. We are also waiting for any words on the current mayor of Guayaquil, Cintia Viteri. She has called for a march, and we are expecting both marches to try to enter the center of the city, which could turn a bit violent today here in Guayaquil.
That was our correspondent Carla Gonzalez in Guayaquil with that report. Now, another 83 mainly indigenous protesters were arrested on Tuesday afternoon and taken to a military base, bringing the total number detained to around 700. Nabil Karoui is part of a group of lawyers working to defend those arrested during the protests. He told Democracy Now! That they are very worried about the latest detentions.
Because of the state of exception, the president is able to use the army to repress people in the streets. So we are very, very worried about that. We know that the international standards about human rights prohibit to use the army to repress people in the streets in these kind of manifestations. We demanded to the Constitutional Court to take a role in this and to revoke the order of President Moreno of the state of exception, and to demand him to respect human rights of the people in the streets. And the court sadly disappointed the people of Ecuador, and he said that the state of exception is constitutional. So right now we got 30 days in which the president will have full powers and the use of the full armed forces of Ecuador. We got several detainees. The president himself said yesterday that over 2,000 people all over the country are detained. We know for sure that yesterday night, 83 people were detained, indigenous people especially, in the protests in the streets, and they were not taken to the official place where they should be presented to a judge. That is the Unidad de Flagrancia, where they should be conducted. We suspect that they were taken to a military base in the north part of the city, but we don't have right now. We don't have official information about them. We are very, very worried about them. We presented an habeas corpus writ to the courts, and we are trying to know where they are.
Nabil Karoui also said the government has no proof at all to back up its repeated claims that the Venezuelan government is behind the protests. He said President Moreno is fomenting xenophobia against Venezuelan migrants.
And one of the things that is taking advance President Moreno is about what people feel about the Venezuelan migration in Ecuador. So he's blaming Venezuelans and he's blaming President Maduro of some of the violence that have been happening in the streets, but he doesn't have proofs of that. And probably right now the protests are happening all over the country, so probably some people from Venezuela are participating in those, but he doesn't have proof of that. And as human rights organizations that are with the people in the streets, in the jails, checking what is going on, We don't have evidence that Venezuelans are participating in the protests or they are producing the violence. So this discourse of Maduro sending Venezuelans to destabilize the government of Moreno is a lie.
Now, the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, has responded to the accusations made by his Ecuadorian counterpart, while also offering a way to resolve the current situation gripping Ecuador.
The International Monetary Fund wants to impose its exclusive poverty-generating model in Latin America. Its oligarchic model that benefits capital, the multimillionaires, and leaves the people behind. That's why the people of Ecuador are in the streets, not because of Maduro. It's about survival. It's about resistance. It's rejection of the International Monetary Fund. That's why the people of Ecuador are on the streets. Yesterday, I saw Lenin Moreno out of reality, totally out of place, surrounded by advisors who tell him, "No, you are a great president. You are doing it very well. Go ahead. You truly are a brave president. Brave to take away the benefits and social rights of people, brave to betray his people, brave to surrender to the International Monetary Fund." If Lenin Moreno wants to see reality, he must withdraw this economic package and speak with the people of Ecuador, hold a dialogue with the peasants, with the workers, with the indigenous communities.
We'll take a short break. When we come back, Guyana's house-to-house registration process is expected to be encoded soon. We'll have more after this. Welcome back. Jamaica's former Education Minister Ruel Reid and his wife, along with President of the Caribbean Maritime University, or CMU, Fritz Pinnock, have all been arrested. They were held in relation to a corruption probe regarding a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme at the Ministry of Education, CMU, and other government entities which fell under Reid's portfolio as minister. Around 5:30 a.m., police raided their homes in an operation conducted simultaneously in Kingston, St. Catherine, and St. Anne. Reid resigned from government on March 20th, while Pinnock was sent on special leave with immediate effect on Tuesday.
75% of
the data collected from the house-to-house registration process in Guyana is expected to be fully encoded by the Elections Commission, GCOM, by next week, Tuesday. This as the country readies itself for general elections on March 2nd, 2020. GCOM has processed more than 2,000 new registrations over the past week that the claims and objections process has been ongoing. Going forward, the Chief Elections Officer will prepare a report for public scrutiny. Claims and objections will end on November 11th.
Six-digit number of the polling station.
A case of modern-day slavery was unearthed in Trinidad and Tobago as the police service rescued 69 citizens who were imprisoned at a church in Arouca, East Trinidad. The 65 men and 4 women, some of whom were handcuffed, shared bunk beds in tiny cages and received meals through a small opening. The police commissioner said the rescued people were slaves as their relatives paid for their institutionalization. A total of 6 people have so far been arrested, including the pastor of the so-called Rehabilitation Center for Human Trafficking.
We have now cracked probably what is one of the biggest situations pertaining to human trafficking in this country. We have been liaising with the DPP. There have been 65 men and 4 women that we have found held against their will. They have been in prison, they've been in cages. Some of them have stated that they've been here for a few years. I have contacted the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Health. This is a much bigger picture, and we'll have to investigate each and every situation. 3 people have been held at this time, one being a pastor. He's being questioned. This is on Eastern Main Road in Arouca, and what we have seen is that this relates to virtual slavery, where persons have been in cages. We have reports from some of them that they've been tortured. It is a much bigger picture where there's profit made out of this, and where it involves family members deliberately sending their loved ones here and then trying to extract the profit from the family.
Staying in Trinidad and Tobago, the country's former Justice Minister Satnarayan Sharma has died aged 76. Sharma was recently diagnosed with cancer and passed away at his Marval home overnight. He was the country's 8th post-independence Chief Justice, serving from 2002 to 2008, and was succeeded by Ivor Archie. Sharma received 2 of the country's highest awards, the Trinity Cross in 2003 and the Shakonia Medal Gold in 1998, for his contribution to the development of law. In July 2006, he was cleared by an international tribunal of allegations of an attempt to pervert the course of justice. Antigua and Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Brown says his country will invest $40 million in riot, breaking a stalemate with Barbados over the purchase of the latter's shares in the cash-strapped airline. He made the comment during a radio program on Saturday.
I have indicated to her that the Antiguan and Barbudan government has $40 million that could be made available to recapitalize riot, and that there should be a capital call, a fresh capital call, in which we will have the existing shareholders and possibly new shareholders recapitalize riot. That will be followed with a restructuring of riot to ensure that it becomes a little leaner and to ensure that it can at least turn an operating profit going forward. So, we obviously will have further discussions, but the idea that we will purchase Barbados' shares, that is no longer on the table. We've taken the decision, instead of buying Barbados' shares, that we will invest directly in riot, subject to the approval of the other shareholder governments.
Álvaro Uribe made history on Tuesday, becoming the first former Colombian president to testify before a Supreme Court on allegations including procedural fraud, extortion and witness tampering that could lead to criminal charges.
A historic event for Colombian justice as the Supreme Court presented its case against ex-president and Senator Álvaro Uribe Vélez. The former leader appeared before Colombia's highest court at 8 a.m. accompanied by his attorneys. He was received by a small group of sympathizers as well as many human rights organizations whose members held photos of victims killed by paramilitaries.
Colombians are celebrating and marking this day of justice. At the same time, we are commemorating our dead, the victims killed specifically during Uribe's tenure between 2002 and 2010. Social leaders, ex-combatants and victims are all present.
In 2012, Uribe sued left-leaning Senator Iván Cepeda, whom he accused of hatching a plot to falsely link him to paramilitary groups. But the court instead opened an investigation into him for procedural fraud, witness tampering and extortion. Uribe, who is senator and the leader of current President Iván Duque's Democratic Center Party, had to answer about 100 questions as part of the investigation.
As a judge, I voiced my support for the Supreme Court in this brave act because despite all the murderers, Álvaro Uribe was summoned. Even though he was not directly implicated for the massacres, this is the first step because, as a citizen, I have been waiting for this more than half of my life. Justice to be served to one of the biggest criminals in Colombia.
Human rights organizations, social collectives, victims' movements and teachers' representatives assembled outside the court. They held posters accusing Uribe of mass murder, demanding justice and an explanation of his alleged link to paramilitaries.
We, the Teachers Union, know that Uribe Vélez has a lot to do with the issue of violence in Colombia. In the last 20 years, teachers have been killed simply for educating children on history by showing them how drug trafficking unions work with Colombian politicians and the parapolitical movements that lead to Álvaro Uribe.
This hearing may be extended for several days. The court has a maximum of 10 days to decide whether it will indict Uribe, allowing him to attend court while being free, if the case is closed or if he will be sent to jail.
Shifting gears now, police in Uganda have blocked off entry to Bobi Wine's home in the capital Kampala hours after banning him from performing at a concert. The musician turned politician tweeted photos of police vehicles surrounding his home, as well as spiked road barriers erected on the pathway leading to his house. He claimed police had also sealed off his lakeside property, One Love Beach, Busabala, the venue for the concert. On Tuesday, authorities announced that Bobi Wine's concert was cancelled because organizers had failed to heed minimum security standards. Coming up, Syrians are fleeing as Turkey launches military action in the northeast. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Tunisian presidential candidate Nabil Karoui has been released from prison 4 days before second round of the presidential election. Karoui was detained in August before the first round of the election and has spent the entire campaign period in prison pending a verdict in his trial for money laundering and tax evasion. He participated in the just-ended parliamentary election where no clear winner emerged. Polling stations will open to Tunisians for the third time in a month on Sunday for the presidential runoff. In other news, civilians in Syria have fled from the border town as Turkey launches a military operation against Kurdish fighters in northeast Syria. Video footage posted online showed civilians leaving the Syrian towns Tel Abyad and Sarikani as plumes of smoke rose into the air. Early on, several large explosions have rocked the northeastern Syrian town Ras Al Ain. Sound of planes could be heard flying overhead as Turkey continues an operation to eliminate what the country's president has called a terror corridor on Turkey's southern border.
We saw 2 tanks in front of our village, so we left, fearing that our children might get hurt following the shelling of the village. Most residents of the village left, but some young men stayed.
Meanwhile, the Kurdish-led forces said it will not target Turkey but stands ready to face any kind of attack. A spokesman also called on the United Nations, European Union and democratic countries to oppose the Turkish incursion, saying failure to do so would be an endorsement of the move.
We send a message to the whole world again. We will not target the Turkish country, but if they insist in attacking us and occupying our lands, we will trigger our right in defending our projects until last blow. We're ready to face any kind of attack.
Candidates are set to wind up campaigning ahead of the 2019 Canadian federal election on October 21st to elect members of the House of Commons to Parliament. Our correspondent Pablo Bibanco gives us more.
Party leaders continue their campaigning ahead of the October 21st vote, and Justin Trudeau is in the north in Nunavut talking climate change. Conservative leader Andrew Scheer and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh both in the Greater Toronto area. Singh meeting with unions and students, Scheer in the suburbs around the city, hoping to pick up votes in those areas. Now, after Monday's debate, the Conservatives seem to be on track to win a minority government, according to the latest polls. According to those polls that came out after the debate, the Conservatives could be en route to win 152 seats compared to 117 for the Liberals and 36 for the Bloc Québécois. The NDP, for its part, is projecting to win up to 29 seats and 4 for the Greens. Tomorrow will be the last debate that will feature all leaders, and this will be in French.
That was our correspondent Pablo Bibanco with that report, and with that we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.